Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome along to EFL Debate, the Championship podcast. We're discussing the teams hovering heedfully, as I've put it, just above the Championship dogfight. About five teams to really unpack this evening, and who better to be joined by than Matt from the We Are 72 podcast. Great to have you on the show, Matt, from the 72 cast. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's first of all get your take on the state of play in the Championship dogfight, because the resurgence from QPR and Sheffield Wednesday have certainly made it a lot harder for those teams in that sort of bracket that we've discussed. Sorry, your sound seems to be off, Matt. I think you might have muted yourself. Try again. Didn't quite catch that. I can't hear you. The funny thing is, we had you on before the show, and we did the test. Well, we did the testing, and it worked fine. So I'm not quite sure what's happened there. I don't know if you can have a quick fiddle with the settings there, Matt. While you do that, I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the teams in that conversation. We spoke to a Plymouth Argyle fan earlier, which we're going to discuss. We're going to sort of play back for you in a moment, and also a Swansea City fan. I think Argyle have made some. That 2-0 victory at Middlesbrough was a huge one for Ian Foster's side, and I think the quality of chances that they created in that game, especially in transition, was huge. I think Darko Giabi seems to be a fantastic addition in midfield on loan from Leeds United. I think it'll be difficult for him to break into the lead side next season if they were to win promotion to the Premier League this season, because that would be a bit of a jump. But I think if Leeds were to stay down, then he might come into the equation a little bit more. Certainly for Plymouth Argyle, the likes of Morgan Whittaker and Ballymumba provide so much talent, and I'm really excited to see how they develop under a high pedigree coach in Ian Foster. Matt, are you there?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Marvellous, I can hear you. Right.
Awesome.
Matt, what's your take on the state of play for the teams just above the sort of dogfight in the Championship?
As I was saying, I think with QPR and Sheffield Wednesday picking up so much under their new managers, I mean, when you look at their form in 2024, they are effectively performing like top half sides. So I think the fact that they've always kind of been below that dotted line, and then obviously all of a sudden we've now seen QPR jump. I think it's almost like these teams have arrived. Like we've seen them rise, and now actually a few teams kind of. I'm really, really concerned, because I must admit I can't really see them dropping. Yes, I know QPR tough games, but carry on picking. Will be quite a few that we're talking about today. Will be quite concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the interesting thing for me is Huddersfield look much improved under Andre Breitenreiter. They already got a 2-1 victory at Watford in his first game in charge. Millwall, similar story, returning legend in Neil Harris, much improved. And actually, when you look at it, a lot of teams won last time. When you look at Plymouth Argyle, Swansea, Huddersfield, Millwall, QPR and Sheffield Wednesday, it feels like we're getting to the stage of the season where the teams, towards the bottom are almost becoming stronger than the mid-table sides.
Yeah, as you said, here, isn't it? I mean, Saturday was remarkable. 7 at the bottom and 1. And obviously, Rotherham as part of that. I mean, I don't want to be disrespectful to Rotherham, but I think they're probably gone. So you're looking at those teams kind of above them, and for them all to be picking up results, as you said, we are getting to that stage now where you almost want to be playing the teams who are kind of in the middle and don't really have as much to play for as some of those teams at the top, and also the ones at the bottom.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Rotherham are gone. I agree. I think the gap to safety for them now is 16 points. That looks huge. But I think what we've seen is the resurgence of QPR and Sheffield Wednesday has probably shone a light on the problems at Stoke City that may have gone under the radar a little bit in different circumstances. If QPR or Wednesday were resembling anything close to the sides that were struggling earlier on in the season. Which team, sort of in that 20th to 15th pack, Matt, would worry you the most right now?
It's tricky because obviously you mentioned the fact that Huddersfield did look a lot better under their new manager. I can't say I know a great deal about him. My concern for Huddersfield is the fact that when you look at the managers that have followed Neil Warnock, they haven't been able to get the same kind of tune out of that. And yes, obviously, Bryson Reiter has come in. He's had a really good victory. He may be fantastic. He may be exactly what they need. But I'm just kind of looking at the guys that followed Warnock and looking at the squad. And I'm thinking, actually, I think Warnock was kind of massively overachieving with that squad. So it could just be a new manager bounce. It could just be, a positive result, or maybe possibly even a couple of positive results, and they might revert to type. So to me, they are one that I am quite concerned about. And I think part of that is due to the strength of the other teams. I look at the likes of Millwall, as you said, of Neil Harris. I think if they sort of revert to type and they become very hard to play against, very tough to beat, then I can see them getting enough points. And I also think that some of the teams that we've sort of mentioned who might be slightly above it, likes of maybe Swansea, Plymouth, I'd like to think they're going to have enough quality. I think Plymouth in particular will probably pick up enough points at home. I'm a little bit concerned about Birmingham, Gab, I have to say.
Yeah.
I think part of that, unfortunately, is the situation with Tony Mowbray. Of course, all devastated here about it. We all wish him all the best, but there's no getting away from the fact it's come at a really bad time for Blues. So, yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about Huddersfield and Birmingham.
Yeah, I agree. I think with Blues, the fact that it would feel disrespectful to Tony Mowbray for Birmingham to appoint a new manager at this stage, because he is still our manager, and in an ideal world he would be able to pick up from from next season, because or even the end of this one, because he has done a fantastic job in his short stint so far. At the same time, Millwall, although Neil Harris wouldn't necessarily be objectively a good championship manager at this stage, given his stints in the lower leagues have been sort of hit and miss, I think it's fair to say. I still feel he's almost the best person to keep Millwall up, because of his history with the club and the impact that he has on that fan base, and the way he sort of just gets buys into the Millwall ethos. Then you look at Huddersfield; they've got a manager with European experience who's clearly got some quality. Luke Williams, I think, is a much better fit for the Swansea ethos. Talk about the Millwall ethos. I think Luke Williams stylistically fits it a little bit better than maybe Michael Duff did. And Blackburn have got John Eustace, which I think is a good appointment as well. Ian Foster have a high quality coach. I don't necessarily think that it's ideal for Birmingham to have somebody sort of leading the team that isn't necessarily handpicked, in terms of Mark Venus, who had been assistant to Tony Mowbray.
No, it's not. And as you said, it would be really disrespectful if they did go out and get a new manager now, because, as you said, in his short time there, he has done well, and he's so well regarded in football. And I feel as though it could actually almost make the fans quite disillusioned again if they did sort of bring in someone on a kind of more semi-permanent basis to replace Mowbray. So, yeah, it is a really tricky one. Obviously, I think the main thing is his health. That is the most important thing. I'm sure, though, he will be desperate to get back on the touchline and play a more active role as we kind of reach the crunch part of the season. I mean, it is really interesting because there are so many different styles down there. I mean, obviously, you mentioned Luke Williams and the fit at Swansea. It does feel like a really good fit. And I must admit, I was a little bit concerned about them, but that victory they had up at the Stadium of Light on Saturday has sort of taken them kind of a little bit away from it. Yes, I know it's only 4 points. That can kind of change very quickly, but I just think they've probably got enough about them. But I mean, listen, there's 12 games to go. And I was saying this to someone yesterday. We sort of get to March kind of time and we think, right, not long to go now. There's still so much that can happen. There's so many points to play for. And I think, when you start in August and you think about those first 12 games, so much happens. And we've still got all of that to happen in the Championship. So, I think the main thing is that this situation with Sheffield Wednesday and QPR has made it really, really interesting. And I do think that there will have been a few teams earlier in the season who would have thought that they are going to be absolutely fine because they'd have looked at Rotherham, they'd have looked at QPR, and they'd have looked at Wednesday, and they'd have thought, well, there you go, that's the kind of natural three. Well, as we've seen with the work that Marty Cifuentes and Danny Röhl have done, they look like they could get out of it. So if you are a Stoke City or you are one of the teams that are just above the drop zone, you are going to be quite concerned as we approach the business end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned actually, Matt, when we spoke that you had spoken to Lucas Yeomans from BBC Radio Stoke. I don't know if you were able to gain a steer from that conversation as to whether you think there will be a resurgence from Stoke under Stephen Schumacher.
The steer that I got was that obviously Lucas is down about the situation at Stoke at the minute, understandably. The weekend was a disaster for them, losing to Cardiff and then all of the other teams winning, dropping into the bottom three. I think for me, one of the things that Lucas and a few other Stoke fans are almost panicking about is they don't want the club to make a short-term decision. I think they would quite like them to stick with Schumacher. Even if they say lose their next few games, stick with him, because I said to Lucas, for me, the worst case scenario for Stoke is that they bring in someone for the short term to try and keep them up in the Championship and they end up going down, because they had Stephen Schumacher. They had someone who knows how to get out of League One. He got out of a very competitive League One with Plymouth Argyle last season. They won the league. They played fantastic football. I think that would really be a really bad short-term decision. Yes, obviously, they're going to be desperate to maintain their Championship status, especially when you think about how much money they've ploughed into the club in the last few years. I completely understand that, but I do feel as though they do need to try and stick with him. And I know, listen, in modern football, especially in the Championship, it's getting harder and harder to stick with managers because fans will very quickly turn. They will call for the manager's head. They will want something to change. But yeah, I think for me, it could be disastrous for Stoke if they did make that short-term decision and then it didn't pay off.
They've brought in 24 players this season, Matt, which is just absolutely extraordinary. And then I've spoken to Stoke fans who even feel like they're going to need another rebuild in the summer. But I don't think that's really going to be possible, given, a lot of the players they signed in the summer just gone were signed on long-term contracts. So for me, what they're going to need is certain tweaks. I feel like they're going to need, they've brought in a lot of talent like Wouter Berger, Bejan Ho and Andre Vidigal to an extent. Berger and Jean Ho have been probably the two standouts, I would argue. But as a synergy, as a sort of as a collection, they've been really disjointed, I think, and maybe it just needs a couple of players to provide, some of those intangibles and just get a bit of balance in place. And whether they're going to need, might have to find that next season rather than this one.
Yeah, and one thing that Lucas did mention to me was the fact that the fans aren't sure if certain players are completely committed. I think, as you said, so many new players coming in, so many players coming from abroad. I think there are certain players in that Stoke squad who haven't covered themselves in glory. And I almost feel as though they're now at a bit of a point where Schumacher needs to decide which players forwards with and almost kind of set some of them to one side and say, look, these are the ones I'm focusing on, because they do have a really big squad. They've got lots of players that play in the same positions, lots of players of similar ability. I don't think that's really helps them either. I mean, they've got a massive game on Saturday at home to Middlesbrough, because their fixtures after that are looking really quite tough. I mean, their next few after that, they've got Leeds away, Preston away, Norwich at home, and then Hull away after the international break. That's a pretty hideous run. So, yeah, massive game on Saturday. I'm expecting a reaction from Borough because they were poor against Plymouth. So it will be a tough one, but I do really feel as though Stoke need to get something out of that.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. I am frustrated by Stoke because I did feel like they'd turned a corner and their recruitment on paper did look quite promising in the summer. But for whatever reason, it hasn't materialised, and it feels like an all too familiar story, I think, for the Potters. But talking of Stephen Schumacher, his old club obviously is Plymouth Argyle, who he left a little controversially earlier in the season. I spoke to Joe Bell from Argyle Life and the Green and White podcast earlier today, and here's what he had to say. So I'm delighted to be joined by Joe Bell from the excellent Argyle Life. Joe, thanks so much for joining us. That 2-0 victory at Middlesbrough with a very high chance creating performance was just what the doctor ordered, I think, for Ian Foster, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's to say the least, Gab. It was a trying week before the Middlesbrough game, obviously 3 games in 6 days, and I think the manner of the defeat to West Brom left a lot to be desired for a certain group of the fan base, and they had questions to answer, rightly or wrongly. No matter what side of the debate you sit on, people are entitled to ask questions and to raise these points. And the squad went up to Middlesbrough with all those questions to answer, and yeah, they did it in pretty good style, should we say? I mean, had it been 3 or 4, I don't think Middlesbrough could have really complained at half time. I thought we were outstanding. And the way we played second half, we were professional, we were resolute, we were confident. You know, there wasn't a moment in that second half where Middlesbrough put us under all sorts of pressure. You know, they kept strong, they defended as a unit, they defended in packs, and we had chances to add to the lead, Gab. And as performances this season go, when you think we beat Blackburn 3-0, Huddersfield on the opening day, beat Norwich 6-2, you know, all of those wins, Sunderland 2-0 at home, that was our best performance of the season by a mile.
Well, there you go. Certainly, a bit of a relief, I imagine, that kind of win and the manner of it as well. It's always such a relief when your team struggling a little bit, and then you put in a great performance like that and get the rewards. I think that's a really great afternoon and brilliant for the travelling Green Army. I wanted to ask you about Darko Diaby, Joe, because he's come in. Excuse me. To replace Luke Cundle. I suppose performances like the one on Teesside won't do him any harm, will it?
No, I mean, he's been playing in a more deeper role. He's sort of been playing the Randall/Houghton role since he's come in, and there've been good performances there. Like Huddersfield, the opening game of his career at Argyle. He'd only been in the building, I'd say, 36 hours top, so he wouldn't have trained with them because he'd have probably met them in Huddersfield. He may well not have actually come down to Plymouth. If he had, it would only have been a brief trip. And he was really good that day, and there were signs of what he could do. And, you know, like many players, these young players, Gab, we've got to remember that they're young in their development. They're going to have bad games. They're not going to be on it all the time. But Fozzie took the decision on Saturday to push him further forward because I think he said he wanted a bit more, I don't know what the word is, tenacity. You know, he doesn't stop. He's a terrier type character. He'll run all day for you. And he wanted that up front. He just wanted an injection of energy up behind Hardy and Whittaker. And it really worked. Like, he was everywhere in the first half. He was at the forefront of everything good that we did. And second half, he did manage to drop a little bit deeper just to help, you know, get on the ball and split play up a little bit. So I think he's a really good player. I can see now why Leeds have been quite keen on him. Obviously, you know, we've all seen Leeds in recent weeks. As you know, he's going to have to improve markedly to get anywhere near their midfield at the moment. So, but we're more than happy just to be a little stepping stone on his development. You know, he'll play almost every game, probably every game now to the end of the season, and that experience is going to be invaluable for his career moving forward.
Absolutely. What do you make of Ian Foster's start overall then, Joe? Because he clearly got some hyper coaching pedigree, hasn't he? He's worked, I think, in Saudi Arabia with Steven Gerrard, worked with England youth level. Obviously, a bit of a big jump to go to Championship as a first-time manager, isn't it?
It is. I think if you take out the second half at Sunderland, you could easily make an excuse that, we went 120 minutes with Leeds just 4 days prior to that. And obviously there was the long distance travelling before that game. You take out the West Brom 90 minutes, and actually you can see a lot of real positive signs in what Foster's trying to do. I mean, I only said on the podcast after the Coventry game that I thought that was our best performance under him, and it was just 2 minutes really of game management naivety that cost us the 2 points that day. So if you give us those 2 points back, you're looking at a really, really solid start to his tenure. And obviously the game against Leeds was always going to be tough. Sunderland had immense quality on the pitch in that second half. I mean, they scored 2 wonderful goals from Jack Clark and Joe Bellingham. But I mean, he's managed to get 2 away wins, Gab, which are like gold dust for an Argyle fan. So it's been largely positive. You can see what he's trying to do, and there are several players in the squad who are having good season and stepped up again. It was only mentioned to me the other day, actually, just how good Adam Randall's been sort of the last month under Foster's coaching. I thought Randall was having a really good first season in the Championship, but I do think he's taken it to another level in the last month or so. So with his coaching through the England setup and some of the players he's worked with, you'd only think the more time he gets with these players on the grass, the better it will be. And finally, after a month without it, we actually don't have a midweek game this week. So he's finally been able to A, get a rest into the group, and B, get some work on the training field. Because I think we had something stupid like 8 games in 25 or 26 days or something crazy through February. So I'd imagine once they got showered and changed after Middlesbrough on Saturday, they all took a great big sigh of relief that they had a blank week ahead of them.
Absolutely. So do you think you're going to stay up then, Jay?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I said last time I was on, I felt pretty confident we would. We've obviously got a tough couple of games coming up now. Ipswich on Saturday are flying. It's sort of like the old enemy comes back to town. I think we're all really looking forward to that one, just because we had a great battle last year, really trying to go for the title, and it would be good to pit our wits against them again now under a different manager. Then we got 2 really big games in the week after that, Sheffield Wednesday and Blackburn, both really tough away trips for different reasons. But then the schedule does seem to get a little bit easier for us. I know football's not one on paper, so I'm not going to get ahead of myself on average league positions and things, because that'd be stupid. But it's actually worked out now that our away fixture list is easier on paper than our home fixture list. So we might see a little bit of a flip around in the form charts. I know that Leicester still have to come to Home Park as well, which could be a bit of a tough watch if we let Leicester have too long on the ball. But you've got to look at it as well, and we're on 40 points already.
That's a good for the end of February. 40 points is a good tally to have at this stage. That's a good.
Yeah, we're looking really at 1 win a month keeps us in the division probably, which is a fantastic position to be in. And whilst I'd like to get to 50 points as quickly as we can, because I do think that's probably going to be the marker. I think 50 will be enough. I'm confident we can get there, and maybe it is just a bit of arrogance or not. I just look at some of the teams below us, and particularly some of their fixture lists and how they're playing at the moment. I just can't see them getting near 50 points. There are some teams that are in dire straits, but there are others that are making good fists of it. QPR and Sheffield Wednesday are really giving it a good go, and I certainly think one of those 2 will get out of it. My gut feeling probably says it will be Sheffield Wednesday who do get out of the bottom 3, but I'm confident we'll stay up. And then I'm really excited about how Foster goes about things through pre-season and into next season, because we'll have another young group. I don't think there's any doubt in that. And it's just what more he can get out of players like Whittaker, Mumba, Randall, players like that, because we're seeing positive signs at the moment.
When you sell them all.
I don't know what you're talking about, Gab. They're all under lock and key. But again, Morgan better get used to witness protection once the transfer window opens.
Brilliant. No, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what he can do. What I do think about the relegation battle, though, Joe, is what we've seen, what's shown by Stoke. Oh, he's dropped out for a moment. And
There we
he's
go.
back. There we go. I think what Stoke have shown is that if you coast and if you let your standards slide, Sheffield Wednesday and QPR are going to absolutely punish you because they've both got really good coaches. So I don't think Argyle can afford to rest on their laurels. But I think that victory at Middlesbrough was really important, and I think that could go a long way to keeping you at this level for another year.
Fingers crossed, because we worked so hard to bloody get here. I said to you last year, Gab, it was written in the stars that the 1 year Argyle get back to the Championship, you need 98 points to do it. And it seems like the 1 year we're back in the Championship trying to stay up, you need a ridiculous points tally to stay up as well. So we don't ever find life easy for ourselves, but certainly going to be a fun roller coaster between now and May.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us, Joe, and keep up the great work on Argyle Life and the Green and White podcast.
Cheers, Gab. Thank you.
Joe Bell there, obviously, as mentioned, from Argyle Life and the Green and White podcast. Matt, from what Joe said there, do you take some encouragement from Argyle that they've got what it takes to finish the job?
I do, yeah, and I think it was really interesting what he said about the fixtures, because Plymouth, kind of stereotypically this season, have picked up most of their points at home. You look recently, they've had a couple of really good away wins at Swansea and Middlesbrough. And then when you look at some of their upcoming fixtures, obviously he mentioned the game against Ipswich at home on Saturday. That's going to be a fantastic game. There is a little bit of a rivalry there from the League One days. But they've got Ipswich at home, Preston at home, Bristol City, QPR, Leicester and Hull. So their home games are probably slightly trickier. But really, away from home, they're playing a number of the teams around them. So it does kind of feel as though the teams that have been so strong at home for most of the season, they could actually kind of guarantee their survival away from home, because they've got to go to Sheffield Wednesday, they've got to go to Rotherham, they've got Stoke away, Millwall away. These are massive games. I mean, I don't really like the term 6 pointers, but they are the sorts of games, if you're Plymouth, if you win them, they are going to take you a long way to safety.
Yes, certainly are. Just before we bring in Kosi from Annie Takes That Chance podcast on Huddersfield Town, I'd also like to play a short clip of the interview earlier today with Luke from SwansCast. So I'm delighted to be joined by Luke from SwansCast. Luke, 2-1 victory at Sunderland last weekend. Just what the doctor ordered, I think, for Luke Williams, and a bit of a Samba star on the show for the Swans in Ronald on the right wing.
Yeah, definitely what we needed was a win. I've been speaking about the recent form, saying it was so well and good having defeats against the top teams and saying how hard a run is. If you're going to go and back it up, then when maybe the teams that are a little bit more beatable, you put in a good performance and get the results. And we did that first time out. Hopefully we can continue. But you're right in saying Ronald being a bit of a star in the making. Since he's come in January, a bit of an unknown signing. No one really knew anything about him before he came in. Wasn't like people liked the fact we signed a winger, like the fact that he was quick and we were going in that direction. But because you don't know anything about him, we've got nothing to get excited about, you know. But that's definitely changed in a couple of weeks. Every single game that he started, I think he only came off the bench in the first game he was here, started ever since. He's lifted bums off seats. He's running at opposition. He's got a bit of trickery. Definitely got a good technique to him as well. He should have got a few more assists to his name in previous games that our strikers have perhaps let him down. So it looks like this week he decided he's going to do it himself and bag 2 goals, which we maybe haven't seen the goal scoring threat from him until this game. So definitely one to keep an eye on. And I did do a couple of Sunderland previews before the match, and I did warn them about him, and he kind of made my words make a lot of sense, I think, when he took to the pitch. So
it's always relief when that happens, isn't it?
Yeah.
One thing I'm really interested in, Luke, is when Luke Williams was at Notts County, one thing he did was convert wingers into a wing-back system, because although I think it's been 4-2-3-1 at Swansea, Notts County he was very staunch in 3-4-2-1 with a
Yeah.
sort of box midfield, and then they had a player called Jody Jones who was converted from a winger into a wing back. They had another one called Aaron Nemain, similar thing. So that seems to be what Luke Williams likes. Do you see a similar transition happening at Swansea, maybe throwing it forward into next season?
I thought that when he first came in, thought exactly the same as you, but he did try it in the first couple of games. But he seems to have quite quickly gone to a 4-2-3-1 afterwards. Obviously, Michael Duff started the season with a 5 at the back as well, and he ended up converting to a 4-2-3-1 system. So I want to say, especially based on the recruitment, because they did only sign wingers in January, out and out wingers, and we are, a wing back area isn't, if you take all the injuries away, it's not the worst cover. You got Josh Key, Carl Norton's been playing there now, and obviously Harrison Ashby on the right, Josh Timon on the left, probably where we're the most short, and Obashi Humphreys can slot in there, and so can Carl Norton as well. But with the wingers being signed, I don't think he's going to merge them all of those players, as well as the 3 new signings, into 2 positions, if that makes sense. So I think he's going to stick with his 4-2-3-1. Whether he changes it going into next year, that would be maybe where he looks at it when he's got a summer to identify how he can transition. I don't think he's going to try and do it now during the season. Obviously, it didn't hit off straight away in it, and I think he saw some quick improvements going to the 4-2-3-1. So I think based on our league position, it's probably safer to continue to push with this style as we are now. And he is getting, a tune of the likes of Ronald and I'm not going to say his name correctly, Placheta, sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Placheta on the left. He's been quite exciting as well. But yeah, so I think we're going to stick with the wingers at the moment. Maybe it'll change down the line.
Yeah, Placheta's certainly a strong runner, isn't he? Do you think, are you excited by what you've seen from Luke Williams' work so far? Because he's a very process-driven coach, and when he gets it right, he can really get it right. And some of the football on display can be very entertaining. Sometimes at Notts County, especially in his second season, there were certain defensive issues. Have you any of those sort of come to the surface a little bit?
Yeah, everything what you just said, really. Have been excited because you can see when it's working and when it's good and when he's scoring and free flowing. That's all the things you want to see. But I have been quite vocal on our podcast about that's all well and good, but you need to also have the other side with the defence. Now, we didn't have a good run of form. The caveat is it was against all the top teams. We played all of the top 6, I think, in an 8-game spell. One of them wasn't under Luke Williams. The West Brom game, we did actually win in the game before he came in. But regardless, there was a lot of defensive issues on display in those games. Now, on one hand, you could say, well, that's the best attacking players in the league, so they're going to expose it. But some of the stuff that was exposed, for me, it was a bit of a cause for concern going forward. And I think I said, basically, look, he needs to prove that it is a case of it's the top teams and the top players exposing that. So when we go up against the rest of the season now is quite winnable games for us now. And them things need to not be exposed by what is considered not the top attacks of the league, and that's what we need to see now. And the jury perhaps is still out a little bit on the defense. So for me, the big issue is he does like to play a high line, and that has been exposed all too often with quick players getting in behind. There's been so many opportunities and a couple of goals scored from players who are running in on our box and our goalkeeper from not far away from the halfway line, like unchallenged, because they've slipped through the line and off the offside trap. You've got the goal we conceded, the first goal against Leicester, for example, and basically 2 or 3 of the opportunities in the first half that Leeds created, they absolutely run us ragged, to be honest. The Leeds game is one to forget. But I'm not writing Luke Williams off. Like, he's come in at a difficult time of the season to change the way that the team plays. And, he's being very brave, saying we're just going to crack on and do my style now. And this is why waiting, you're just wasting time. And, I'm happy to see that, and I encourage that and hope that it goes well. I want it to do well. But then you get the other side where you end up slipping 4 points above the bottom 4, and you're like, okay, I understand you've been playing all these difficult games and you want to just get this new style of play embedded. I understand that completely. But you don't want to also then lose all the confidence, all of the momentum, so that when we get to the situation where we can start winning, it's already too much damage, if that makes sense. And I think sometimes the approach against these better attacks is a little bit naive, just because they're learning this new way of defending, which makes it easier to make mistakes. And then when you've got these top teams coming down, it's probably why it was easier for them to exploit it. But, he's gone and backed that up now with a win against Sunderland. And basically what I was asking for was, now they're out of the way, show us that all that work in those games that you didn't expect to get points actually means something. Now you can get points. And they did. So as long as that continues, then my concerns will be eased. But yeah, there's still quite a while to go, and I think some of the other teams started picking up results as well. So we're not out of the water yet, but I think the Sunderland display does show that maybe the momentum and the sort of confidence in the team is there, even though they've been on this bad run of form. They really are backing the manager, and I do think there's going to be more to come going into the end of the season.
Perfect. Thanks, Luke. Luke speaking there from SwansCast. Matt, just before we come on to Huddersfield, and Kosi's just waiting in the background from And He Takes That Chance podcast. With Swansea, it looks like Ronald, the right winger they've signed from South America, has made a real difference, the Brazilian. Do you think Championship clubs should be quite audacious and outward looking, I guess, when it comes to recruitment?
Yeah, I think they should be. And I think it's something that we've seen in the Premier League in the last couple of years. Far more South American players coming over, obviously, since we left the EU. I think quite often these things do sort of trickle down to the Football League, don't they? And we've seen it a bit more in the Championship. I must admit, I haven't seen a great deal of Ronald, but he was excellent the week. He looks like a lot of fun as well. He's the sort of person that people are going to want to pay to go and see. So, yeah, I do think it's something that Championship clubs should look at. For me, it's just all about maybe not expecting too much from these players too soon. They almost need a little bit of time to bed in. I mean, it's a very different culture. It's a very different climate. And of course, the football is very different as well. So I just think that maybe sometimes fans need to temper their expectations, kind of give them a few months to bed in. And then, to be honest with you, maybe towards the end of their first season or even into their second season, that's when you can really start to judge them.
Yeah, I agree. But so even more impressive, I think, that Ronald's made that instant impact and was so impressive in that 2-1 victory at Sunderland. He looks like such a strong runner, and he certainly got an eye for goal, and his composure in the final third looks really strong as well. Delighted to be joined now by Kosi from the And He Takes That Chance podcast on Huddersfield Town. Good evening, Kosi. How are you?
Yeah, good, Gab. Yeah, excited for the weekend. Words like exciting Huddersfield Town didn't exist under Darren Moore, but we are revved up for the weekend, mate.
Well, I wonder if it's Andre Brighton, a writer, who's had a bit of a might be a factor behind that, Kosi.
Yeah, definitely. I think he was a brave appointment for Huddersfield, in my opinion, because so the names linked with the standard ones on your betting slips. Duff and Eustace and Eckenball, obviously, who knows if they were really interested. But so I was really pleased that Kevin Nagle kind of took this left field approach. And I think it's a bit of a coup for us, Gab. I think a lot of people were piping up about, he's got no experience of English football. But the fact that what he has got is lots of experience working in a lot of other countries. And I don't think I've remembered a Huddersfield manager who's come in who's won a top level title. I know some people can debate how strong Swiss football is, but the fact that he came in at that FC Zurich team and I think they're 8th and in a 10-team league and then won the league the next season, it's like kind of raised eyebrows. I do watch a lot of German football, so kind of did know a little bit about him and that as well, and his achievements at clubs you would say, I don't know, similar to Huddersfield, but like always battling against the odds, like Paderborn. Did obviously the hierarchy at Huddersfield feels that it's transferable skills, but yeah, I don't think he'll have come cheap, Gab, as well, which is obviously that's often a thing pointed by Huddersfield fans, on the cheap, etc. And I think it'd been so easy to get one of those standard managers who know there's a division. But so I'm really pleased, and obviously you're all hoping for that new manager bounce, which we didn't get under Moore, but we obviously got Saturday later on.
Matt, when English clubs appoint managers from the continent, there can be this group of people that say they've never managed an English football, and yet when clubs from other countries within the continent appoint a manager from elsewhere in that continent, there seems to be maybe a little bit less judgment. And I suppose I wonder, is that right? Is English football a slightly different level because the Championship probably isn't far off the standard of, say, Liga in France? Or do you actually feel like we're a little bit too judgmental of managers that have really achieved huge things like what Kosi's mentioned that Brighton Reiter has managed to do in Switzerland?
Yeah, I do think sometimes we can be a little bit insular. It's almost a case of we want them to prove themselves in England first. And, I think that's disrespectful, isn't it? It's possibly a bit arrogant. He has got a fantastic things. I think also, I was mentioning it earlier, the fact that, well, anyone who wants to go, I mean, do look at someone that's a really good fit for that club. Young, we've seen in the season is a risk. Also, in the years, we've still seen have really so I think it's good for a team like Huddersfield to. I think also for the fans, not just the same games kind of going around and just taking bottom. Fantastic job to get Sheffield United promoted. Who's going to get you more excited, Paul Heckingbottom or Brighton Reiter? So I think that's part of it as well. Ultimately, we kind of live vicariously through our football clubs. We want to be able to dream. So, Huddersfield fans will quite rightly be thinking, if we can stay up this season, we do actually have a manager who's proven that he can win things. He can win promotion with teams who are underdogs. So, yeah, for me, I think it's a bold appointment, but at the same time, it's a really exciting appointment.
Certainly is. Kosi, what do you think's been the change based on the evidence of that 2-1 victory at Watford that Brighton Reiter has made to get Huddersfield looking a bit more dangerous again?
Yeah, it was interesting because if you'd have asked me after about an hour, obviously we were 1 down and Tom Ince blew a big chance to probably put the game out of reach. You could have argued, not much. But yeah, you know what? I think, do you think it's kind of lucky, manager? Because one of the weirdest subs that I think we've ever seen was Tom Edwards came on, much maligned Tom Edwards coming at fullback, and people were scratching their heads because Alec Matos come off, who's probably been one of our standout players, and lo and behold, Edwards slips the beautiful ball in for Ward to turn it in for the winner as well. So I just feel that he was kind of making subs. That was a sub that no one. Yeah, I was talking to someone today apparently who left the ground because Tom Edwards came on. I can't believe that. People are like that. But yeah, there's a lot of angst to get against him. But yeah, I just feel that as well. He's Danny Ward, coming on as well. I think as a striker, obviously he's been missing for some time and that as well. And I think it wouldn't have probably been my preferred choice, to be honest with you, because you've got Radulovic up there who's not really had much of an impact so far. Obviously Healy's been injured. And yeah, and he came in and beautiful finish as well. But he did change the formation a little bit as well from a 3-4-1-2 to a 3-1-4-2 as well, where we kind of can't bin the Rajoni kind of number 10 role as well. So he kind of we were going more down the flank, Scab, later on in the game, which showed with the goals. Beautiful cross from Nakayama for the first one, and just mentioned there for Edwards as well. So he did change it, and no mean feat really when he's only been there for 2 games as well. And the things that I'm impressed as well. I mean, it depends how you are really with managers. I like someone to listen to, and that they kind of need to inspire me a little bit with the post and pre-match press conferences, which again, I feel I hate bagging a manager for the character, but Moore didn't do that with me. But little things after the game, Gab, where he was saying the pubs of Huddersfield will be bouncing tonight. I just love little things like that. I know that's the German culture and that, but it's just that's what people want to hear, and he's going to get everybody for Saturday. And then another thing he was mentioning as well about he mentioned Tom Edwards has not played since October. I just think it's quite amazing that level of detail that he's got again of a player that's barely featured. So they were saying that in the interview that he had presentations. I don't know if he's going down Bielsa's route, but real detailed presentations on individual players, how they do, what he's going to do, where our kind of weak links are, and yeah, you might say, well, hang on a minute, he's coming to an interview, so he should, but no, but he could have easily got his CV out there, Gab, and just like there, look what I've achieved, give me the job, that speaks for itself. But the fact he's presenting in, saying this is what we need to do, this is what we're doing, he just feels a real calm presence, mate, as well. I know Wagner kind of felt that, but he had his mad moments, didn't he? When obviously the monk spat and then jumping on players when they've scored. But this is a guy I don't know, when you speak when you kind of hear him speak and how we kind of play, he just feels calm and assured. And I suppose he should do with his experience that he's got, Gab. So it does feel we're in good hands. But then I suppose playing devil's advocate, what Ince puts that in, we lose 2-0 and everyone's saying, well, why has he come in? You haven't got any experience. John Worthington should have got the job. So sometimes it can be a fickle game, really, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly think Huddersfield are in a better position for the work John Worthington did as caretaker, but I really think Brighton Writer is the one you needed to really get yourselves over the line and maybe inspire a little bit more optimism for Huddersfield in terms of the long term, much though it is still the short term objectives that are at the forefront. Do you feel like the resurgence, the possible resurgence under Brighton Writer and I suppose the little bit more optimism around the place now, combined with the strong January recruitment, Kosi, do you think fans are willing to give Kevin Nagel a bit of leeway after a summer of recruitment that maybe wasn't the best?
Yeah, definitely, mate. I think the summer's recruitment. The irony is, Gab, everyone's shouting out for strikers for Huddersfield. They signed 2, and obviously Reece Healy, he could be out probably till Easter, and Radulovic has hardly had any impact, for by and large. So what people were wanting has not really changed it, and all of a sudden we're scoring goals with no real. I know Ward obviously came off the bench, but that was his first game for a long time, and it's just like, yeah, I think they've seen obviously Kevin Nagel, put his hand in his pocket in January, which obviously always gets people. Happy as well, but I don't think there's much angst against him, Gap, really, and that as well. I think they get that he's trying to learn the game. A lot of people had canned more earlier, but I think they get that he's still trying to work the English game out. They love his personality. Obviously, it's for debate whether people like his tweets and his videos and stuff. I know, so he said some interesting things about Leeds on Saturday and him and sidekick. So that obviously for people who like that kind of stuff, they're buzzing. But I must admit, some of that stuff for me is like kind of not for me, really, but it's he's a bit of a character, mate, which I think Huddersfield people need. Again, I just kind of think that went against Darren Moore. Obviously, we were blessed with Neil Warnock, love him or loathe him, and Brighton Writer. While I don't think he's going to be like a Warnock kind of character and that as well, I think he'll be definitely listenable. But Nagel's still got stock in the bank with but like as just said though, that goes against us. On Saturday, Ince puts that in, we lose 2-0. All of a sudden, Leeds come and give us a kick in on Saturday, and then all of a sudden it's like, where are we going? He should have appointed Worthington. So things can change. But it's like Matt said though earlier. I think the exciting thing it's like if we can stay in the division. I know everyone talks, but he was saying, I want to get in the Premier League as quick as possible. That, but for me, it's not about that. It's not really about that. It's like, what can he, with his contacts and things, what can he bring in players wise and stuff like that as well? And I think he's going to work out, what we do need and what we don't need. I think that for me, the Nagel thing, the only thing I'd have done probably different was, and it's easy saying it in hindsight, I'd have probably can remember more maybe. I think we lost at Norwich just before December. I mean, it'd been a bit harsh for a Christmas sacking, but I'm just thinking of the window coming in, and all of a sudden, all these players are coming in, But no, I think the fact Brighton Wright's put his reputation to that, and he did. I don't know that snap in their press conference when he was unveiled, but it's like, do you think it's a big risk for a man of your, coming in, potentially relegation? And he were like, why is it a risk? So we're almost like, I really like that he backs himself, because there's not many, I don't think, would look in that situation with 13 games to go. Potentially, I know obviously we want to keep us up, but you're risking maybe a bit of a League One action there, aren't you? And you know where that kind of could end up. So I think all round it's just brave from Brighton Writer, brave from Nagel, and I think Mark Cartwright is the one really who hasn't got the credit in the bank, if I'm being honest, Gab. And part of me is what it is, man or whatever. But I suppose he's here now, so it doesn't matter. But I think Cartwright will walk the plank if we don't get this one right. But obviously early signs are good, and we're excited for Saturday. That is for sure.
Absolutely. Do you think you'll stay up then, Kosi?
I do, mate. I think we've got enough in the. All of a sudden, players are coming back. I know we had 2 goalkeepers on the bench, so it kind of sounds a bit contradictory. But we've got players coming back. I think we've got a bench that toe with Leicester and Leeds is no, you can't compare. But there's options, things that can happen off there. I think that. It's such a big win on Saturday, because I know I'm not one for looking at in-game league tables and whatever and stuff results. I must admit, I'm not really a betting man, and I'll just put the scores on at 10-5. But people, Millwall are winning at Southampton, Sheffield Wednesday are winning, this, that, and the other, and we were losing. And you're thinking pressure's on, Leeds to come next week, where you can't really maybe expect anything, and all of a sudden he's turned that around. So I think there's enough there, Gab. But April looks like the month for me where it's gonna. going to be big because we've got all these 6-pointers, Stoke, Millwall, these teams that, are around us, and it's easier said than done. So it'd be nice just to nick a few points here and there when we don't expect it. I just don't like writing games off, which I think we did a lot with Moore. And I think we'll give Leeds a game on Saturday, mate. And again, they're going to have to not play at their best. Obviously, we're going to sell, but the place will be bouncing on Saturday, Gab. And I think that goes a long way in Huddersfield because it's not been like that for a long time, probably since that playoff semi against Luton. So don't underestimate that as well. But we know that, I just think he'll have a plan for Leeds, mate. Whether it be good enough, not, I don't know. But it's it's a game I go to. You click in the turnstile on Saturday dinner time and think I'm looking forward to this. I think we could do something where, cost it back before pre-John Worthington, and you're thinking, big beating.
Where it's great to see Huddersfield go into that game with a little bit of optimism, given how big a challenge it is. Kosi, thanks so much for your insight.
Cheers, guys.
On Town, and keep up the great work on the And He Takes That Chance podcast.
Thanks.
Right then, Matt. Bottom three. Rotherham, I think, are a bit of a done deal. So who have you got joining them in the bottom three then at the moment?
It's really tricky because I know we've kind of spoken about QPR and Sheffield Wednesday about the fact, will one of them go? Will they both go? Will they both stay up? I must admit, I think they're both going to stay up. I'm pretty confident about Sheffield Wednesday. I'm slightly less confident about QPR, but I've just got a feeling that Martí Cifuentes is going to somehow get them over the line. So for me, I am really concerned about Stoke. I have to say, I'm really concerned about them. From talking to Lucas yesterday, in a way, I think that's almost made me more concerned. But yeah, I think just looking at the fixtures they've got coming up, looking at their squads, their victories under Schumacher. I mean, when you look at them, they've beaten Wayne Rooney's Birmingham, they've beaten QPR, they've beaten Rotherham. Apart from that, they haven't beaten anyone. So, I mean, I'm concerned about Stoke. It's interesting because from talking to Kosi, I'm actually more confident now about Huddersfield, especially when you look at their fixtures. They still have to play a number of teams around them. So if they do go down, really, they will only have themselves to blame. So, yeah, listen, I think that kind of third spot for me is still massively up for grabs. I mean, when I look at the league table, I said about the fact that I think Swansea and Plymouth possibly have maybe a little bit too much quality. I think Blackburn will be fine with John Eustace as well. And I've mentioned about Millwall and Neil Harris and about the fact I think that's a good fit. I think he'll get them sort of doing Millwall things again. So I think they'll get enough points. So, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm really struggling for these last two spots.
I'm really struggling as well.
I'm gonna be bold and say Stoke. And then, I mean, the last one, Gab, I've got to be honest, I'm a little bit worried about Birmingham. And that is, unfortunately, just due to this situation. I think if Tony Mowbray was fit and well and he was still at the club, I would be so confident about Birmingham. But unfortunately, where it's just up in the air, you just don't know.
Do you know what? I'm kind of inclined to agree with you, Matt, because at this stage of the season, people will say it's an overused word, and I kind of get why. I actually think momentum at this stage, going into the last quarter of the season, is really important, and the feel of the place and the dynamic and whether people are behind the manager. I think it's that sort of thing, the psychological side, that's actually more important than maybe the technical and tactical side. Obviously, that is important as well. But I look at it and I think we've mentioned QPR and Sheffield Wednesday, who are very much resurgent for reasons that we've covered. Millwall, again, have got Harris. Huddersfield have made a great appointment by the looks of things in Brighton Writer, and I can see them picking up. Swansea have got the right fit, like we've mentioned with Millwall. Blackburn, I think, have done well to get Eustace, although I wouldn't necessarily consider them safe just yet. They've gone forward without a win, and then Argyle got a huge win at Middlesbrough. Whereas I think I look at Birmingham and Blackburn as the sides outside this pack where they've not necessarily got upwards momentum because of Birmingham losing Mowbray, and Blackburn, I do think Eustace will keep them up, but I'm not necessarily convinced. So yeah, I can see why you've gone with Birmingham, and to be honest, I think I might agree with you on that. I think if we could beat Sunderland on Saturday, I think that would be huge. But yeah, certainly that resurgence from QPR and Sheffield Wednesday does make things absolutely wide open. And, we could probably name any of what, 10 teams in that bottom half. So it really is eight or nine maybe. So it really is wide open. Matt, thanks so much for your insight. It's been great to get you on from 72cast, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Legend. Really appreciate that, Matt. Thanks to everyone for joining us. This has been the EFL Debate Championship podcast. We'll see you again next week.